I balanced the lemon tart on my forearm and nudged the church door open with my elbow. The hallway still smelled like wood polish and artificial roses, exactly like it did when Clarissa was confirmed here in 9th grade. Graduation Sunday. Every spring the school held it in this space, wooden pews, rented flower arches, polite clapping, and a potluck afterward. I was not on the program. I never was. This year, Clarissa's daughter, my niece, was graduating valedictorian of St. Bridget's Academy. Everyone in the family showed up. Aunt Rosalind wore a fur-trimmed shawl, even though it was 82 degrees. Uncle Matt brought his new girlfriend, who looked like she belonged in a Lexus commercial. My sister wore a pale gold-sheathed dress and a matching hat, her arm looped elegantly through her husband's. She did not see me when I walked in. Or maybe she did and chose not to. A few heads turned, not many, just enough for me to feel that slow, chilly draft of social omission. That half-second of hesitation people give when they're trying to place you, then politely decide not to bother. I found a spot near the back and placed the tart gently on the serving table. The note taped to the foil read, "Vanessa's citrus tart nut-free, my handwriting, my offering, my only invitation. If you have ever been asked to just bring something sweet while others brought speeches and applause, hit subscribe, because you will understand what this story really means." Vanessa? Hey, Clarissa's voice rose from the crowd like a champagne cork. Can you do me a quick favor? The lemonade needs refilling. She did not wait for my answer, just waved toward the kitchen like I worked there. I nodded once softly and walked past a line of folding chairs where her friends were seated. One of them whispered, "Oh, is that the nanny? I thought they had someone older back then." Another giggled behind a paper fan. She practically lived with them when Clarissa was in nursing school, right before that. I think she just stuck around. No one corrected them. If you have ever been written out of your own story and watched someone else narrate your role, go ahead and subscribe. This one is for you. The lemonade sat in a plastic cooler with a cracked spout. I crouched beside it, pouring pitcher after pitcher into mismatched cups. As the spout jammed and splashed onto my hand, the cold hit like a slap, sharp, startling. I blinked and kept going. I had done this a dozen times over the years at birthdays, after church services, even at the small backyard funeral when Clarissa's first husband passed away. She had been 24, Sienna was 4. I was the one who stepped in, not because anyone asked, not because anyone thanked me, but because I could not leave a child hanging in midair while the grown-ups sorted out their grief. And now, here we were, 18 years later, graduation day. My name not printed anywhere, my seat unassigned, my job unchanged, refill support disappear. Clarissa clinked a spoon against her glass to get the room's attention. The ceremony was about to begin. She stood at the center, her hand on Sienna's back, like she was presenting a prize. "This girl," she said with her practiced smile, "is everything we prayed for." Everyone clapped. The pastor gave an opening prayer. The head of school made jokes about curfews and final exams. Parents took photos in between. I stayed near the kitchen door, watching Sienna's eyes move across the room, searching for someone. Not me, I told myself. She would not be looking for me. But then, just for a second, her gaze paused. Her lips did not move, but her face changed. She saw me. She knew. Back in my tote bag beneath the napkins and my cardigan was a folder. A thin blue one frayed slightly at the corners. It held 3 pieces of paper, a copy of the endowment letter, the anonymous donor form, and the scholarship transfer record. None of them had my name typed directly, but all of them led back to a single routing code. My foundation. Sienna had applied for a need-based tuition grant in 9th grade after Clarissa lost her second job. The school never knew who covered the scholarship, only that it cleared instantly. Clarissa cried at the kitchen table when the acceptance letter came. I remember pouring her tea while she said, "God is good," and texted the family chat a prayer emoji. She never asked who stepped in, and I never told her. The school choir began to sing. The students lined up in their navy gowns and white stoles. Sienna walked slowly, her head held steady. When her name was called, the applause rose louder than most. She had earned it, every bit of it. And still I stood in the back near the serving tables, like I belonged to the staff. Then the dean stepped forward. Adjusted the microphone. Before we conclude, he said, we want to recognize someone not on the program. Someone whose quiet generosity has allowed many of our students to walk across the stage, including today's valedictorian. A hush fell over the room. Clarissa shifted in her seat. Her smile dimmed just slightly. The dean continued. Our largest anonymous scholarship donor who has never sought acknowledgement is present with us today. And while we were not given permission to name them, Sienna Langford asked for a single line to be read. He unfolded a slip of paper, looked up, read clearly. She knows who she is, and so do I. Thank you for raising me when no one else could. The air thinned. Clarissa stared straight ahead. I stood motionless. No applause yet, just stillness. My name never spoken, but now unmistakably known. The applause began slowly, not the kind that bursts out on cue. This was uncertain, uneven. People glanced at each other first, like they were waiting for someone else to confirm what they were feeling. Some looked toward the stage, expecting someone to step out from behind the curtain. No one did. I did not move. Clarissa leaned forward slightly in her seat. Her brows pulled together, her mouth parted, confused, not yet concerned. She clapped twice, polite and stiff, then stopped. Because I stepped forward. I walked the center aisle with my hands by my sides, my eyes steady, each step deliberate. Calm like rain sliding down a window pane. I passed two of Clarissa's friends. One adjusted her shawl. The other blinked and looked away. Earlier they'd whispered about me. Now they could barely look at me. The dean didn't say my name. He didn't need to. He stepped down from the stage and met me halfway. Thank you, he said quietly, for everything. I nodded once. I didn't take the mic. I didn't scan for my family's reaction. I turned and walked back toward the folding chair I'd been sitting in all morning. The same spot, same silence. But the room had changed. As I passed Clarissa, her voice followed behind me, thin and trembling like a thread pulled too tight. Vanessa, she called out. That was you. I stopped. Turned just enough to face her. Her face looked different now, not just shocked but dismantled. Like she had built an entire narrative and was watching it unravel in real time. You funded it, she asked, barely louder than a whisper. All those years I looked into her eyes. Sienna deserved stability. I gave her what I could. She swallowed hard. But why didn't you ever say anything? You let me thank strangers. I tilted my head. You never asked. That stopped her. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was swollen with history, birthdays, missed calls, unanswered texts that came in groups, never one-on-one. Performances over presents. She blinked, then blinked again slower. She looked like someone remembering things she'd spent years trying to forget. I had always been useful, never visible. Sienna was off the stage now, moving through the crowd. Her cap sat slightly askew, tassel swinging gently with each step. She wasn't a child anymore. She wasn't even Clarissa's shadow. She was her own. And today she had chosen to walk toward me. When she reached me, she opened her arms without a word. I hesitated for half a breath, then I stepped into the hug. She held on tight. I'm sorry I didn't say it sooner, she whispered. Thank you for everything. My throat tightened, but I didn't cry. Clarissa watched. I could feel her watching. She took one step forward. Sienna, she started, but Sienna lifted her hand. Mom, please. That one word please landed like a quiet gavel. Final, not cruel, just resolute. Clarissa stopped. Sienna turned back to me and took my hand. Come sit with me. I shook my head gently. This moment is yours. You should have it. She didn't argue, she simply nodded. That was always her way, understanding more than she ever said aloud. She turned and walked toward her friends, toward her seat, toward her life, and I let her go, because she no longer needed me to carry the weight. At the reception, I stood by the lemon tart. The foil was peeled back, 2 slices left. A woman I didn't recognize approached. I just wanted to say, she began softly. I hope you heard what the dean read. That was beautiful. I nodded. I heard him. She smiled and stepped aside. A man in a navy blazer came next. Board's lucky to have people like you. I didn't correct him. I wasn't on the board. Never sought a title. Only purpose. Later, Clarissa found me near the punch bowl. She wasn't wearing performance this time. No polite smile. No camera-ready voice. Just fatigue. Maybe even shame. I never knew, she said. I never hid it, I answered. You could have told me. I could have, I said quietly. But I wasn't the one telling stories. She looked down at her hands. You must think I'm awful. I don't think about you as much as you think I do. Her eyes welled slightly, but she blinked it away. Was it for her? Or was it to prove something to the rest of us? That question made me pause. No, I said. It was never about you. It was about keeping her steady. She didn't ask for the life you handed her. I just didn't want her to carry the weight of your chaos. Clarissa opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her gaze shifted toward Sienna, who was laughing now, surrounded by her classmates. And then she said nothing. There are moments in life when the words you always wanted to say finally arrive, but they no longer matter. This was one of them. I didn't want revenge. I wanted her to see the story clearly, and now she had. That was enough. The reception carried on as they always do. Someone announced that the cake would be cut in 10 minutes. Plastic forks tapped against paper plates. People gathered near the photo booth, adjusting their caps and corsages. I stood in the corner with a glass of lukewarm punch, watching Sienna from a distance. She looked free, the kind of free that doesn't need permission. Every smile, every handshake, every congratulations, she moved through it with ease, light like someone who no longer carried anyone else's narrative. Clarissa had disappeared for a while. When she returned, her heels didn't click with the same certainty. She moved like someone who had just come out of a room filled with mirrors and didn't like what she saw. No more posing, no more leading the crowd, just her now walking alongside it. I caught her watching me more than once, but she didn't approach. That was always her way. When she couldn't steer the story, she chose silence. Eventually, Sienna came back to me. She had a bouquet in one hand, likely something a teacher or friend had passed her as a congratulations. "They're mostly for show," she said with a small grin, "but I think you should have them." I shook my head gently. "They're yours." She studied me a little longer. "You're the reason today happened. I know that now." "You made it happen," I replied. "I just cleared the path." That was when Clarissa approached. No spotlight this time, no wide smile. Just a woman standing across from her sister with nothing rehearsed left to say. "I didn't know," she said. "About everything." I stayed quiet. "You could have said something," she tried again. "You wouldn't have listened," I answered. She looked away. "You're probably right." It was the closest she had ever come to saying I'd been right. And still it wasn't quite enough. "I thought you were just around," she continued. "Always there, but never really involved. I didn't realize." She stopped searching for the words she hadn't practiced. "That I had someone to thank," she finished almost apologetically. She shifted the bouquet in her hands, but the flowers didn't soften the awkwardness. It wasn't that she lacked remorse. She just didn't know how to carry it. "You were her mother in all the ways that mattered," she said, eyes downcast. I held her gaze. She already had a mother. I was just the person who showed up. Clarissa flinched, not because it was cruel, but because it was true. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded envelope. It was slightly bent and worn at the corners. "Sienna wrote this. She wanted you to have it after the ceremony." I took the envelope and slipped it into my bag without looking at it. "Not yet, not there." "I know I can't fix it," she said, "but I want to try." I ran my thumb over the edge of the envelope, then stopped trying. "Just be better." She nodded, slowly, like someone who had never been asked to change, and was now considering it for the first time. Across the room, Sienna called out. She was waving at us, motioning toward a group photo. Clarissa looked at me. "Should we go?" "You go," I said. "She wants her mother in the photo." Clarissa hesitated, then walked away. I stayed near the window, fingers curled loosely around my cup. I had grown used to these positions, present but peripheral, useful but invisible. But something was different now. Today, I hadn't been erased. As the photographer adjusted his lens, Sienna turned her head. Just before the shutter clicked, she looked back. Her eyes found mine across the room. She smiled. A quiet, steady smile. One meant for no one else. Not for her mother, not for the guests, not even for the camera. Just me. That was the moment that stayed. Not the speech, not the applause, not Clarissa's awkward half-apology. Just that one look from the girl I had raised in silence. And for once, she didn't look away. Later that night, after the gala had long since emptied out and the city lights outside my window dimmed into stillness, I sat alone at the dining table. The folded envelope Clarissa had handed me quietly without a word was still tucked in my purse. I had carried it through every moment since. Through the ride home, through the silence in the hallway, through the glass of water I poured but never drank. It sat now beside me, unopened. I stared at it for a while. Something about it made me pause. Maybe it was the unfamiliar gesture, or maybe it was the way it seemed to weigh more than paper should. I waited until the wall clock ticked past 10 o'clock before I reached for it. The rest of the house was asleep. The lights were off except for the one above the stove. Even my cat had curled up in her chair, uninterested in this small, trembling moment. The envelope was ivory-thick formal, the kind of stationery our family used only for weddings or condolences. My name was written across the front in Sienna's unmistakable handwriting. Her letters always tilted slightly forward, like they were eager to get somewhere. There was no "aunt" before my name, no flourish, just me. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, handwritten in dark blue ink, no stickers, no embellishments, just her voice in ink. She began by thanking me, but not in the empty performative way people sometimes thank relatives. Her words were small, real precise. She wrote about how I used to braid her hair on test days, saying it made her feel luckier. About the time she sprained her ankle and I left work early to sit with her in urgent care when no one else could be reached. About the Christmas she cried in her room after her parents forgot to buy the book she asked for, and how I showed up with 3 wrapped in recycled paper and tied with yarn. She remembered it all. She wrote, "You made me feel worth noticing, even when no one else seemed to." That line undid me. I read it twice, then again. My fingers pressed the paper so tightly I almost tore it. But I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, I folded the letter and held it against my chest. Not as a dramatic gesture, not as proof of anything, just because I needed to feel it. In that quiet, I realized something I had never put words to. I had not vanished. I had not been erased. I had simply been moving at a frequency only a few could hear. And she had heard me all along. I stayed at the table long after that. The letter rested beside my tea. I did not reread it. I did not need to. My phone buzzed once with a message from Clarissa. I hoped the letter said enough. I stared at her name on the screen. Then I turned the phone face down. She had not asked how I got there that night. She had not asked why the CEO had spoken my name. She had not acknowledged the timeline or the meaning. And I had not offered it. That was our rhythm, one side performing, the other side enduring. And now, for the first time, I did not feel the need to fill the silence. I thought back to every family dinner where I had cleared dishes without being asked. Every celebration I attended without being included in photos. Every conversation I was present for, but never invited to join. I had mistaken my endurance for invisibility, but maybe it had been something else all along. Maybe it had been proof. Proof that I was steady. Proof that I could stand without applause. Proof that while they were busy rehearsing praise for each other, I had been writing something truer in the background. And tonight the curtain had moved. Not because I pulled it, but because the wind shifted. There was a strange kind of satisfaction in knowing I would not have to explain anything. That I would not be asked to justify, or soften, or walk anything back. The letter was not an apology. It was not even recognition from the one who had overlooked me. It was something better. It was proof that someone had seen the real version of me, quiet, flawed, invisible in the places that did not require noise, and chose to say thank you anyway. I turned off the kitchen light, left the envelope on the table, and went to bed with a strange, unfamiliar lightness in my chest. For the first time in years, I slept without rehearsal. I did not reimagine conversations. I did not plan responses. I did not rewrite what should have been said. I simply rested. Because the truth had spoken, not with volume, but with memory. And that was enough. 2 days after the gala, an invitation arrived in my inbox with the subject line, Mentorship Circle, Private Roundtable Invitation. It was from Jalen. No assistant, no middleman. Just him. The message was brief. He had seen too many founders struggling to find grounded counsel, especially from those who had built in silence. He wanted me to consider being part of a closed advisory group, something off-record, no spotlights. Just real guidance. He ended it with one line. Some people carry wisdom the way others carry status. I know which I trust more. I did not reply immediately. I closed the laptop and stared at the blank wall behind it. I thought about everything that had just happened and everything I had worked to keep beneath the surface, and how somehow it had all surfaced anyway. That afternoon, I went for a long walk through downtown. I passed the bookstore where I used to browse shelves. I could not afford the corner coffee shop, where I once overheard 2 venture associates mock a pitch that sounded remarkably like mine. I walked past those ghosts like old coats I no longer wore. When I returned home, I opened the laptop again and replied, yes, quietly, but yes. The next morning, Clarissa called. I almost didn't answer, but something made me swipe across the screen. Her voice was different this time, softer. She asked if I would meet her for lunch. I arrived first as always. The restaurant was one we had been to before, during better times, if such times ever truly existed. She showed up 10 minutes later, wearing a navy blazer and the same gold pin she wore at the gala. As she sat, she reached into her bag and pulled out something I did not expect, an old photo of us as children. "Do you remember this?" she asked. I nodded. It was taken during a summer trip to Cape Cod. We were barefoot in the photo, chasing gulls, both laughing. Back before we knew how different we would grow to be. She set it between us on the table, then looked me directly in the eye. "I want to understand," she said. "I won't pretend to now, but I want to try." I believed her. Not fully. Not yet. But it was the first time she had ever said anything without rehearsed polish. We talked for 2 hours, not about the investment, not about the gala, but about us, about childhood, about who we had become. She listened more than she spoke. And when she did speak, it was in incomplete sentences, honest ones. By the end, I told her one thing I had never said before. I never needed to be celebrated. I just wanted to be respected. She blinked, then nodded. I think I can start there. And maybe she could. After we parted, I walked 3 blocks to a quiet bench near the library. I sat there watching people pass, some in suits, others in gym clothes, all moving towards something. I was no longer angry, not at Clarissa, not at our parents, not even at myself. Because somewhere along the way, I had stopped waiting for someone to say, "You belong." I had chosen to stay seated anyway. That, I realized, was the real legacy. 3 weeks passed before my mother reached out. It was a Sunday morning, the kind where everything is quiet and soft, like the house is still deciding whether to wake up. Her call came at 9:30, right as I was steeping tea. I saw her name on the screen and waited until the last ring before answering. She skipped pleasantries. "Your father and I were talking," she began. Her voice held the usual composure, but something in the undertone was different. Not regret, not quite. More like rearrangement. We didn't know Verity, about any of it. I said nothing, not out of spite. I was simply listening. "We assumed, well, we thought you had given up. But then Clarissa told us more, about the company, about what you did." Still I said nothing, because there was no apology yet, just excavation. And we realized, she added, maybe we did not see you clearly. Maybe we looked for reflections instead of reality. There it was, a sentence worth hearing. I thanked her, genuinely. She asked if I might come by for dinner that week. Just us, just to talk. I agreed, not out of longing, but out of peace. That night, I returned to a folder I had kept buried in a password-protected file. It held the early documents for Langford Meridian Ventures, the name choice, the paper trail, the aliases, all of it. I reread the first email I sent to Jalen, still under the original pseudonym. It was formal, precise, a little cold. I remembered exactly how I felt writing it, sharp, exhausted, unsure if I would ever be seen clearly again. And now, weeks after that gala, everything had shifted. Not because I made noise, but because time had worn the edges off silence. Evolve Insight had sent me a gift box 2 days earlier, handwritten notes from the team, a framed photo of the new headquarters, and one message from Jalen. "You taught us how to listen to the quiet." I kept that line. Clarissa sent a short email the same day. No subject line, just a single sentence. "I used to think you had vanished. Now I know you are just further ahead." I did not reply. Some messages are not invitations, they are closings. The next weekend, Sienna came over. We made pancakes and stayed in sweatpants. She asked questions, real ones. She wanted to know how I had learned to invest, why I never told anyone, what made me keep going. I told her what no one else had asked, because I believed in what was possible even when no one else did. She nodded, thoughtful. "Do you think I could learn?" I smiled. "You already are." We talked for hours. She didn't check her phone once. At one point, she pulled out a small notebook and started jotting things down, terms, ideas, names. I watched her with quiet awe, not because she was becoming like me, but because she had always listened when it mattered most. Before she left, she handed me another envelope, this one thinner. Inside was a printed flyer for her university's Women in Tech Night. Keynote speaker Verity Langford. I may have mentioned a few things, she said shyly. They asked. I just told the truth. I held the paper for a long time after she left. Not because I needed the recognition, but because it meant someone had traced the path back to me without asking me to walk it first. On the night of the event, I stood in front of 70 young women, each one balancing ambition and doubt in equal measure. I did not tell them to fight. I did not tell them to shout. I told them to listen to themselves first, to not fear building in quiet, to trust the work even when the applause does not come. Afterward, a few stayed behind to talk. One asked, "How do you know when it's your moment?" I smiled. When you stop waiting for someone else to say it is. I walked home alone that evening. It was chilly, but not unpleasant. The kind of cold that makes you zip your coat a little higher and walk a little slower. As I passed the plaza fountain, dry now for the season, I remembered all the times I sat there thinking I had failed. And I whispered aloud, not to anyone, but to myself, "You were just early." Then I kept walking. No one stopped me, no one needed to, because finally I was not walking toward something. I was walking in it. The dinner invitation came on a Wednesday, not from my mother this time, but from Clarissa. Just us, she wrote. No pressure, just conversation. I almost declined, not out of resentment, but because there was nothing left I needed from her. Still, something in me softened, not for her, but for the quiet possibility of closure. So I said yes. She chose a restaurant in Midtown, elegant, understated, the kind of place that serves water in crystal stemware and lights candles at dusk. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting upright in a navy blouse I remembered from her law school graduation. Her smile was small, careful. "Thank you for coming," she said, rising to hug me. It was brief, polite, the kind of hug people give when there is history between them, but no longer a script. Dinner was slow, not awkward, just measured. We talked about Sienna, about our parents, about Evolve. "You know," she said, finally setting her wine glass down, "I read everything I could about Langford Meridian. I never imagined—" Her voice trailed off. "I didn't need you to imagine it," I said gently. "I just needed to build it." She nodded. "But I should have asked. I should have seen it. Or at least been curious." Maybe I said. "But that's not what our family taught us. They taught us to perform, not to wonder." Clarissa looked out the window. "They're proud now. You know that, right?" "I know," I said. "But that's theirs to hold, not mine to chase." The check arrived. She reached for it. "I've got it," she said, half laughing. "Least I can do." I let her. It was not about money. It was about posture, about letting her give something back, even if just a meal. Outside, the city had cooled. The sidewalks glowed under street lamps. She hugged me again, a little longer this time. "Come to Thanksgiving?" she asked. I smiled. "I'll think about it." She nodded. "Fair." We parted without promises. Just a kind of understanding, one that did not rewrite the past, but made space for something quieter moving forward. The next day I returned to my office, a small sunlit space above a coffee shop downtown. I sat at my desk, fingers hovering over the keyboard. I was building again, not for them, not even for the ventures, but because that is who I am, a quiet builder. My assistant knocked once and entered. "Jalen's team called," she said. "They want to discuss a second fund." "Good," I said. "Let's do it." I glanced at the wall where a simple frame held a typed quote. "You were just early." I remembered when I had whispered that to myself beneath the cold breath of a winter fountain. And now, sitting here, I no longer needed to whisper it. It was already known, because the story had never been about applause. It had never been about proving anyone wrong. It had always been about building something solid, something no one could take or name for me. And that day, as I poured myself a cup of tea, I realized the revenge was never loud. It was the foundation they all now stood on. And I never had to say a word. What stays with me is not the final moment on stage, but the silence she chose afterward. The kind of silence that holds power not to wound, but to end a chapter with grace. She didn't need to fight. She didn't need to explain. She simply walked away knowing what she built could never be undone. Some goodbyes don't need farewells, only distance and dignity. If you saw yourself in this story, hit subscribe to keep hearing kindness echo after heartbreak.